Hello, everyone. My name's Archee. I'm from the School of Humanities and Communication Arts at the Western Sydney University in Australia. I'm sorry to not be there in person. I just could not afford the time to travel to Vienna. Please email me if you'd like to discuss my research in any way. I'm also available on Telegram or even on WhatsApp. Okay. What I'd like to do is to move on to PowerPoint, and let me just share my my screen with you. So here we go. So what I'm going to be talking about is an evaluation of an online blended degree. That is the Bachelor's of Communication degree. The BComm degree at Western Sydney Uni was converted in 2015. It used to be a sort of a face-to-face and blended learning degree, but it's now, as of 2019, it can be a fully online degree or a fully blended degree of 24 units. Any single unit can be taken in online mode. There are no lectures, but there are in fact 25 to 30 short custom video pods for each unit actually on YouTube. So each student is expected to take advantage of these video pods every semester. The tutorials themselves are either 60 minutes or 90 minutes, and they're usually using a blended learning platform using Blackboard. For the online students, there's an optional 60-minute online tutorial available using Zoom, the Zoom video conferencing system, which I'm using at the moment. And as a result of this, there were thousands of videos that were created over a 3-year period, and they're still being used as we speak. What's actually happened, of course, is that the entire degree has become a reusable education package, so to speak. Now, a little bit of background. Blended learning and online teaching have been used for over a decade at most universities around the world. The benefits of blended and online are still being researched and debated. At the same time as this, Australian universities have faced fairly massive funding cuts for well over a decade. And so blended and online modes have become, first of all, fashionable, and secondarily necessary in order to be able to deal with less money and, of course, more students. The strange thing is that surveys of whole degrees in Australia and lots of other places around the world are rarely performed by individual faculties or schools in universities. This is just a strange occurrence. The literature review surrounding blended learning and e-learning and is quite large and massive. Most say that blended learning is better than traditional classes, but fully online teaching needs special care depending on the student's characteristics. Poquet et al. From 2015, in their fairly large meta-analysis of other meta-analyses, they say that assessment items are remarkably the same as in traditional modes. They say that the role of the instructor is minimally studied, and that systematic evaluation of learner support and satisfaction is quite often overlooked in most of these studies. In terms of the method that I used an adapted online learning environment survey from Trinidad and Pearson from 2005. So originally there were 9 scales from 54 Likert items plus some open-ended questions. So I've updated these to 11 scales, which comprised 69 Likert scales or Likert items plus the equivalent open-ended questions. So the things that I included from the old online learning environment survey were things like computer usage, teacher support, student interaction and collaboration, personal relevance, authentic learning, student autonomy, equity, enjoyment. And I added 3 new scales: interactive content, evaluation and assessment, and also the Blackboard interface and navigation, because I was interested in how students actually, or what students actually thought of Blackboard. Now, in terms of results, in terms of online versus blended students, of the 235 students who graduated over about 2 years, 129 submitted the survey, or roughly a 55% return rate, which isn't too bad. Now, of this 55%, 59% of all students had no experience of online mode. 25% of all students had completed 1 online unit. 8.5% had completed 2 online units, and 4%, a fairly small number, had completed 8 online units or more. That is more than around about 1 year or more of their degree. So the online mode is effective for probably working, motivated students who need maximum flexibility. But as you can see, a fairly large percentage, you know, well over 75% of all students had only really attempted 1 online unit, and then possibly said no, they didn't really want to do any more. The survey's 11 scales brought up the following medians, and I used the median here because means and modes were inappropriate. Most of the distributions from all of the items were heavily skewed, negatively skewed. So most of them were towards the positive side of the 7-point scale. You know, everything was pushed over to the right. And as you can see, of a 7-point scale, here are the averages of the 6 to 8 items that comprise the scale. So the top rating average or median, of course, was equity, followed by authentic learning, and followed by student interaction and collaboration, student autonomy, and probably computer usage after that. The median is being used because of the negative skew, which obviously distorts high means and gives you high means, distorted high means, because you know the distributions are pushed over to the right. Now, if you think about this, Australian students also rarely use the extremities of 7-point scale. So 1s and 7s are out of the question. Thus, something like a score of 6 is a pretty high score for an Australian student. Now, American students are different because of their nature, because of their culture. Americans tend to score things, you know, 1s and 7s on a 7-point scale are quite common. This is not the case in Australia. What is apparent here is that for all of these scales, all of the medians are positive ones. That is, all the students actually were positive about the that particular you know, variable in terms of the scale variables. So even Blackboard rated a 4.83. It was useful, maybe not overly useful, but it certainly was better than nothing. Equity. This whole scale rates the highest and comprises the items that ask students to compare their own experiences with others in terms of equity and fairness. Students mostly believe that they were all treated similarly in blended and online mode. Favoritism does not seem to be a problem. All students believe that they are treated quite fairly. In terms of authentic learning, 5.8, these are questions relating to the relevance and the real-world application of their tasks and resources. And this is consistently highly regarded, given the degree majors are in public relations, advertising, journalism, and media production. The degree itself in communication is one of the very first in Australia and very highly regarded in the industry, as is shown by student satisfaction here. In terms of interaction and collaboration and autonomy, medians of 5.6. These scales comprise items that relate to how students work by themselves and, of course, with each other. These medians are high, meaning that students appreciate the way that they can be both individuals and also collaborative agents with each other. Now, if you look back at that particular, this particular results, you'll also see that the scales of teacher support and also personal relevance also have fairly high medians of 5.0. So all in all, in terms of the Likert scales, the appreciation of the degree is quite high. Now, this is a different matter when it comes to the open-ended questions. There were 12 open-ended questions, and here they are. Do you have any issues with computer usage? Please specify any other teacher support details. And so basically, for all of the scales, there was an open-ended question that related and allowed students to actually voice their own opinions, not actually deal with the scale items themselves. And of course, any other comments. So these are quite difficult to score and assess. Only 66 of the 129 students used these open-ended questions. A variety of strong opinions were stated that expressed problems or voiced gratitude. Some of the highlights from the open-ended questions were these. Blended learning does not work well with mobile phones or tablets. This is true across the board, especially with Blackboard. It works with computers very well, but phones and tablets, a bit trickier. Face-to-face classes are great. Now, we're living in a world of blended learning and online learning on mobile phones, and face-to-face classes are great, is what some of the students have said. Video pods are not as good as a real lecture. Now, this is a funny thing because the video pods themselves, just like lectures themselves, weren't terribly well attended. Almost 100% of students watched the first 1 or 2 weeks of video pods, and then as the term progresses, the hit rates on the YouTube videos start to peter off. The students are not engaged enough really to look at all the video pods on a weekly basis, unless of course there's something terribly important in that video pod that they have to find information from. So if there's any tests or quizzes on and the answers are in the video pods, of course, then they'll turn them on and look for those answers. But unless there is a real need to do so, the video pods were not viewed very popularly towards the end, even the beginning. They start to peter off from about week 4 or week 5 onwards. Blackboard is useful, but offline is the place for collaboration. So students, if they were going to collaborate, they were going to collaborate face-to-face. They might contact each other through their phones, through Facebook, through Twitter, even WhatsApp. But if they were going to collaborate, they would meet face-to-face. Instant messaging and Facebook are really useful ways to work with others for contacting, of course, maybe even for swapping assignments, but real collaboration is done face-to-face. The degree is too theoretical and not practical enough, is one of the comments that came out. Listening to someone else can help me as a learner. Group assignments here are sometimes a real problem when someone does not pull their own weight, and this is almost true across the board. That is, group assignments where, say, 3 or 4 students work together in groups and they produce the one assignment are pretty much disliked by almost everybody. And the real problem, of course, is that students, or some students, tend to do more work than others. So when that happens, there's a bit of, I suppose, enmity, and that's a bit of a problem, because there are going to be students who don't actually do very much work, and they get exactly the same marks as the students who do a lot of work. Lastly, and this is an interesting comment, online communication is too mediated by technology for it ever to be as effective as face-to-face communication. It impairs communication in a learning environment. Online communication is no easier than face-to-face communication, but it is less effective. And I thought that was a very telling comment from one of the students. In terms of the statistical tests I used, comparing the online with the classroom groups reveals no major differences at all in any of the items, except for something like, I would enjoy my education more if more of my classes were face-to-face. So the online students here disagreed significantly more than the classroom students. That is, the online students who actually answered the survey did not think that face-to-face was as good as the face-to-face students. This indicates that a very small number of students who have done maybe 8 or more online units, probably less than 10%, the online mode works very well for these students. For the other 90%, they actually do prefer working in blended mode or face-to-face mode. In terms of watching the video pods, there are no differences between online or blended learning groups. That is, there is this continual petering off, or of diminishing returns in terms of the video pods and the viewing of those by basically everybody, all students in the degree. Online students do not view the video pods any more or any less than their classroom counterparts. I tested this using an ANOVA. Now, this is the same. This is the true for things like gender, age, and also the undertaken comms major, whether it be public relations or advertising or journalism or media production. Everybody basically acts pretty much the same. Now, the conclusions here is that the blended learning survey provided valuable feedback about the BComm degree. As a conclusion, group assignments are a problem and need to be monitored very carefully. There's almost zero use made of forums, with no interest in student participation from students themselves. Facebook is used, of course, yes, but forums, the Blackboard forums, certainly just unused, no interest at all. The decreasing video pod uptake needs careful consideration, given that it takes a long time and it's quite expensive to create these video pods. Lastly, of course, possible creation of an institutional instant messaging system was stated by a couple of students. That is, they thought that use of WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger was not the appropriate way to talk to students within the institution, even though they did. So that what they thought might be useful was to create an institutional instant messaging system, a chat system, of course. Lastly, I would like to add that a whole degree evaluations need to be implemented in higher education in Australia and maybe other countries as well. I don't know about some of your countries, but in Australia, evaluations of whole degrees is a pretty rare occurrence. I think it's a useful one for a whole range of reasons. All right, thanks very much. Thanks for your attention. Get back to me if you have any comments or questions. Okay, thanks very much.